Have you ever noticed how the wisest people you know seem to be fading away? Not dying, not moving, just vanishing from the noise? Here's what nobody's talking about. There's a mass exodus happening right now, and it's completely invisible. The most conscious, aware individuals are silently stepping off the stage of modern life. No fanfare, no goodbye posts, no dramatic exits. They're just gone. And here's the disturbing part: if you're watching this, you've probably felt it too. That strange pull, that growing inability to tolerate small talk, that exhaustion from pretending you care about, things that suddenly feel hollow. You might think something's wrong with you, that you're becoming antisocial, that you're broken somehow. But what if I told you this withdrawal isn't a breakdown, it's a breakthrough? What if this disappearing act is actually the most natural response to finally seeing reality as it truly is? What I'm about to share might change how you see your entire life, because once you understand what's really happening, you'll never look at society or your place in it the same way again. The Great Awakening. Something profound is unfolding across the planet, yet most people remain completely blind to it. Those who have awakened, those who have pierced through the illusion, are simply evaporating from mainstream society. There's no rebellion, no manifestos, no grand statements, just a quiet retreat into the shadows, a conscious choice of silence over chaos. And if you've experienced this magnetic pull yourself, if you find yourself unable to stomach the superficial conversations, the empty gatherings, the constant performance, then what I'm about to reveal may bring you profound relief. Because this withdrawal isn't pathology, it isn't dysfunction, it's actually the most organic response when someone truly wakes up. What awakening really means. Let me clarify what I mean by awakening. I'm not referring to reading some self-help books or entertaining pleasant concepts about universal oneness. I am talking about that earth-shattering moment when the curtain falls and you suddenly perceive that nearly everything people do is a form of unconscious automation. They're acting out scripts, regurgitating phrases, cycling through patterns, all while being utterly unaware they're in a trance. When you're still asleep yourself, this creates no friction. You blend perfectly. You can engage in meaningless chatter and feel completely satisfied. You can obsess over others' judgments and believe it genuinely matters. You can pursue empty goals and label it achievement. But the instant you awaken, the moment you truly perceive what's unfolding, everything transforms. Suddenly, you're like someone who stepped out of a cinema into blazing sunlight. And when you attempt to return to that darkened theater, when you try to sink back into your seat and watch those flickering projections again, you simply cannot, because now you know it's merely light and shadow. You know it isn't real. The collective dream. This is what's occurring with awakening individuals right now. They're discovering they can no longer engage with the collective dream, not because they're superior or more evolved or better than anyone else, but because their entire system simply refuses to tolerate it anymore. You see, society functions on a shared agreement, an agreement to pretend the masks we wear are our true faces, to pretend the beliefs we hold are actually ours and not absorbed from our environment, to pretend that all this urgency and seriousness and ambition is taking us somewhere meaningful. And everyone must participate in this pretense for the system to function. It's like a theatrical production where every actor must remain in character. But when someone awakens, they break character. They forget their scripted lines. They begin staring directly at the audience. And this creates profound discomfort, because the awakened person can perceive what's genuinely happening. They can see the terror hiding beneath the bravado. They can see the void beneath the busyness. They can see that most conflicts have nothing to do with their apparent subject matter. When someone points at another tribe and declares, "Those people are the enemy," the awakened person recognizes this as a mechanism for avoiding one's own inner demons. When someone broadcasts their outrage to the world, the awakened person sees this as unconscious content seeking an external target. When society fractures into opposing camps, the awakened person sees two shadows fighting phantoms. And once you see this clearly, you cannot unsee it. You cannot return to treating it all as serious. You cannot participate in the blame, the judgment, The self-righteous fury because you understand it's all projection. One massive exercise in pointing outward to avoid looking inward. The necessary withdrawal. So what does the awakened soul do? They withdraw, not from hatred, but because remaining in the game demands they betray their own vision. Every conversation requires pretending they don't see what they see. Every social event requires performing a version of themselves that no longer exists. Every interaction asks them to diminish what they've become, and eventually the soul says, enough, stop the pretense, stop the performance, stop reducing your depth to shallow concepts just to maintain connection. Go where you can breathe freely. Now let me be crystal clear about something. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is not shirking responsibility. This is not some escapist fantasy where you hide from the world because life is too challenging. No, this is something entirely different. This is the recognition that remaining in unconscious environments actively damages consciousness itself. It's like demanding a plant grow in complete darkness. It might survive briefly, but eventually it withers. The awakened person discovers that being surrounded by unconsciousness isn't merely uncomfortable, it's depleting. The energy tax every time you're immersed in environments filled with sleeping people. You must work extraordinarily hard to maintain your own wakefulness. You must constantly filter out projections. You must hold your center while turbulence swirls everywhere. You must stay clear while everyone else exists in fog. And this requires tremendous energy, invisible energy that nobody witnesses or acknowledges. You're doing psychological labor that others don't even recognize needs doing. And eventually, you realize you're expending all your vitality just attempting to remain conscious in spaces that are actively dragging you back into sleep. So you make a choice. You choose consciousness over belonging. You choose truth over acceptance. You choose your own inner clarity over approval from people who cannot perceive what you perceive. And this is when the disappearing begins. The gradual exit first. You abandon social media because you recognize it as machinery designed to maintain unconsciousness. Every scroll is an invitation to judgment, comparison, outrage, distraction. For someone who's awakened, it feels like swimming through toxic waste. So you simply stop, you delete the apps, you cease checking, and suddenly hours of life return to you. Then you begin leaving social circles not with anger or declarations. You just stop appearing because you realize most gatherings are theatrical performances, people performing their success, their contentment, their viewpoints, and you can no longer perform. Your authentic self has emerged, and it has zero interest in pretense. Then you leave certain relationships not because you stop loving people, but because some connections were constructed around who you used to be, around the sleeping version of yourself. And now that you've awakened, there's no common foundation anymore. You're speaking different languages, you're inhabiting different realities. Then you leave your career. This is often the most agonizing departure because society has conditioned us to believe our work defines our identity. But the awakened person can no longer perform the role their position demands. They can no longer pretend to care about matters that are meaningless. They can no longer participate in systems they see through. And so they leave, sometimes rapidly, sometimes gradually. But they leave because staying would mean dying in a different way. It would mean destroying the consciousness they've fought so hard to cultivate. What happens in solitude? Now let me reveal what occurs in this withdrawal, because it's not what most people imagine. Most people assume that disappearing from society means becoming isolated, depressed, lonely. But for the awakened person, the opposite unfolds. In solitude, they finally stop being lonely. You see, there's a profound difference between loneliness and aloneness. Loneliness is what you experience when surrounded by people who don't see you. Aloneness is what you feel when you're finally free to be yourself. When the awakened person withdraws, they discover something extraordinary. They discover they were never truly with other people, even when physically surrounded. Because genuine connection requires consciousness meeting. Consciousness, and when you're awake in a room full of sleeping people, there's nobody to meet. But in solitude, in that quiet space away from the noise and the performance and the projection, you meet yourself. Really meet yourself? Not the version you've been performing, not the role you've been playing, but the actual living, breathing consciousness that you are. And this isn't lonely. This is coming home, the hermit phase in this space. You can finally hear your own thoughts without constant interference from others' opinions. You can finally feel your own emotions without absorbing everyone else's energy. You can finally discover what you actually desire, what you actually believe, who you actually are. This is what I call the hermit phase, and it's absolutely essential for anyone awakening. You cannot transform while maintaining all your old connections and commitments. You cannot become a butterfly while still living as a caterpillar. There must be a withdrawal, a cocooning, a period of deep internal work. And during this time, the awakened person isn't escaping. They're integrating. They're processing all the unconsciousness they've absorbed over the years. They're healing the wounds that came from pretending to be someone they weren't. They're developing the strength to stand in their truth, even when everyone around them remains asleep. This is hard work, much harder than staying asleep. Because when you're awake, you can no longer blame others for your pain. You can no longer project your darkness onto convenient scapegoats. You can no longer avoid your own depths by staying busy and distracted. You must face everything, all the fear, all the pain, all the ugliness you've been avoiding. And you must do this alone, because nobody else can do it for you. The return, but here's the beautiful part. Once you've completed this work, once you've integrated your shadow and discovered your authentic self, you're no longer dependent on others for your sense of reality. You're no longer seeking approval or validation or belonging. You've found something far more valuable. You've found yourself. And from this place, if you choose to return to society, you return transformed, not to participate in the unconsciousness, but to offer something different, a different frequency, a different possibility. You become what I call a border dweller, someone who exists on the threshold between the sleeping world and the awakened world. You're present but not absorbed, available but not dependent, engaged but not entangled. You might work with individuals beginning to wake up. You might create art that speaks to the depths. You might write words that serve as maps for other disappearing souls. You might simply live your life so authentically that others begin wondering if there is another way to exist. But you never return to the mainstream. You cannot, because once you've tasted consciousness, you cannot return to sleep. Once you've touched your authentic self, you cannot return to performing a role. Once you've seen through the game, you cannot pretend it's real. Is this selfish? Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Isn't this selfish? Shouldn't we stay engaged and try to help wake others up? Shouldn't we work to change the system from within? And here's what I want to say to that. You cannot give what you don't have. If you haven't fully awakened yourself, if you haven't completed your own inner work, if you haven't integrated your own shadow, then you have nothing genuine to offer others. You'll just be another sleeping person attempting to wake up other sleeping people. You'll just be projecting your own unconsciousness while claiming enlightenment. You'll just be spreading more confusion while believing you're bringing clarity. No. The most loving thing you can do is awaken fully yourself to complete the deep work of integration, to become genuinely conscious, and then, from that place of real awakening, you can be available to others who are ready. The truth about most people understand this. Most people aren't ready. Most people don't want to wake up. They want to continue dreaming their dreams, playing their games, performing their roles. And that's perfectly acceptable. That's their right. Your job isn't to wake them up. Your job is to wake up yourself and then to be available, quietly, gently, without force or evangelism, for those who are beginning to stir in their sleep. This is why the awakened are disappearing. They go in where they can be real, where they can breathe, where they can continue developing their consciousness without constantly having to defend it, or explain it, or dim it to make others comfortable. They're finding each other in small circles, in quiet spaces, on the margins. They're creating little islands of consciousness in an ocean of sleep. They're building alternative ways of living that don't require them to betray themselves. And this isn't abandonment. This is actually the most responsible action they can take, because the collective doesn't need more people participating in its unconsciousness. It needs people who have completed the hard work of waking up. It needs living examples of another way to be. It needs individuals who have found their authentic selves. The call home. So if you're feeling the pull to disappear, if you're finding it increasingly difficult to participate in normal society, if you're losing interest in the games and the performances and the noise, then listen to that pull. It's your soul calling you home. It's your consciousness asking for the space it needs to fully emerge. Don't fight it. Don't feel guilty about it. Don't try to force yourself to stay engaged with things that drain you. Give yourself permission to withdraw. Give yourself permission to be alone. Give yourself permission to disappear for a while. This isn't permanent. You'll return when you're ready, but you'll return as someone different, someone whole, someone authentic, someone who can offer real consciousness rather than just more unconscious performance. And in the meantime, use your solitude well. Do the inner work. Integrate your shadow. Find your authentic self. Develop your consciousness. Because this is what the world actually needs. Not more people pretending to be awake, but people who have genuinely awakened. The ancient pattern, the spiritually awake, are disappearing because they must. Because consciousness cannot develop in unconscious environments. Because authenticity cannot emerge while performing a role. Because truth cannot be found while participating in collective lies. So let them go. Or rather, if you are one of them, let yourself go. Withdraw without guilt. Disappear without apology. Be alone without loneliness. And trust that you're following an ancient pattern, a necessary pattern, the pattern that every awakening person must follow. The caterpillar must dissolve in the cocoon before becoming the butterfly. The seed must break apart in the dark soil before becoming the tree. The awakened person must withdraw from society before they can return with something real to offer. This isn't the end. This is the beginning of genuine consciousness in a world that desperately needs it. But that consciousness must be developed in solitude before it can be shared in community. The final truth. So, disappear if you must. And know that in your disappearing, you're actually preparing something. Something the sleeping world cannot yet see. Something it will need when it begins to wake up. You're not abandoning anyone. You're pioneering. You're going ahead to prepare the way. You're becoming what others will eventually need you to be. And that is the most loving thing you can possibly do.